25 Forgotten Garage Habits that Made Tools Last a Lifetime. Most tools do not die all at once. They are slowly neglected. A wrench gets tossed wet into a drawer. A handsaw is left with pitch on the teeth. A screwdriver is used as a pry bar until the tip twists. A plane sits under a leaking shelf. A drill bit goes back into the coffee can, dull, rusty, and nameless. Then one day, the tool feels cheap. But it was not always the tool that changed. Sometimes it was the habits around it. In 1961, in a one-car garage behind a small house in Dayton, Ohio, a father finished fixing a screen door just before supper. He did not throw the tools back into a pile. He wiped the screwdriver on an old rag. He brushed sawdust off the bench. He put the awl back in the same drawer where it always lived. He touched the edge of the handsaw with his thumb, noticed a little pitch near the teeth, and cleaned it before he went inside. No one clapped for that part. No one called it craftsmanship. But that was the reason his tools were still working 20 years later. Old garage men understood something modern homeowners often forget. A tool is not only bought once, it is kept every time it is used. Today, cheap tools make replacement feel normal. A plastic case breaks, so the whole set gets thrown away. A bit gets dull, so another pack goes in the cart. A screwdriver slips, so people blame the brand. Sometimes the tool really is poorly made, but often even a good tool cannot survive a garage with no habits. Old fathers, grandfathers, mechanics, carpenters, and neighborhood handymen had small routines that protected their tools from rust, dullness, damage, loss, and misuse. They were not fancy. They were not expensive. They were repeated. Number 21 explains why old-timers hated a loose pile of tools more than almost anything. Number 16 shows the little cleaning habit that saved saws and blades from years of frustration. Number 8 is the reason some men could find the right screw or washer in 30 seconds. And number 1 may be the greatest forgotten garage habit of all. They treated tools as something entrusted to them, not something disposable. So here are 25 forgotten garage habits that made tools last a lifetime. Number 25, wiping tools before putting them away. The simplest old garage habit was also one of the most important. Wipe the tool before it goes back. Not tomorrow, not when the job is over for the season, before it returns to the drawer, box, pegboard, or shelf. An old father might finish tightening a hinge, pull a rag from his back pocket, and wipe the screwdriver without thinking. A grandfather might clean a wrench after working near a damp basement pipe. This habit worked because tools carry home what they touch. Moisture, dirt, grease, sawdust, plaster dust, paint, and sweat all cling to metal and handles. Leave that on the tool, and the garage does the rest. Dampness becomes rust. Grit works into joints. Sticky residue catches more dirt. The rag was not decoration. It was maintenance in its smallest form. Modern people often treat cleaning as a separate job. Old garage men treated it as the final motion of the work itself. The tool had helped you. You cleaned it before asking it to wait for the next job. Number 24, keeping one oily rag for rust-prone metal. Many old garages had a rag that was not for cleaning hands. It was for tools. A lightly oiled rag might live in a coffee can, a tobacco tin, or a corner of the bench. After wiping dirt away, an old-timer might give certain metal tools a quick pass with that rag. A plane sole, a handsaw plate, a brace bit, a chisel, or a wrench used in damp weather. The point was not to leave tools wet or greasy. The point was to leave a thin protection against rust. This mattered in garages that were not climate controlled. Old garages got cold, hot, damp, dusty, and unpredictable. Metal noticed. The old habit cost almost nothing. It used a rag that was already too worn for the kitchen, and a little oil kept for practical work. But that little film could mean the difference between a tool that aged gracefully and one that became rough, orange, and unpleasant to use. Old men did not baby tools because they were sentimental. They protected them because they expected to need them again. Number 23, hanging tools where air could reach them. A tool tossed into a damp drawer can rust faster than a tool hanging in the open. Old garage men knew this. That is why so many older garages had pegboards, nails in studs, wooden racks, wall hooks, and outlines around tools. It was not only about looking organized, it helped the tools breathe. A saw hanging on the wall dries better than a saw buried under rags. A square stored upright is less likely to bend. A hammer on a hook does not sit in spilled water. Pliers on a peg do not grind against chisels in a drawer. Hanging tools also made absence obvious. If the hammer spot was empty, somebody knew it. If the hand drill was missing, the wall showed the hole in the routine. Modern toolboxes can be excellent, but a sealed box filled with dirty tools can become a little rust chamber. Old garages used air, visibility, and habit together.
The wall was not only storage. It was a memory system. Number 22. Giving every tool a home. Old-timers often said it without ceremony. Put it back where you found it. That rule could sound strict to a child, but it was one of the reasons old tools survived. When every tool had a home, it did not get lost in piles, stepped on under the bench, left outside in the grass, or forgotten near a job that was finished 3 days ago. A wrench went in one drawer. The good screwdriver went on one hook. Drill bits stayed in one index. The small oil can had one shelf. This habit saved more than time. It saved tools from damage. Lost tools are exposed tools. They sit in rain. They fall behind cabinets. They get borrowed and forgotten. They are replaced unnecessarily because no one can find them. Older fathers understood that disorder spends money quietly. The tool with a home had a better chance of lasting because the family knew when it was missing and where it belonged. The old rule was not about control for its own sake. It was about respect made practical. Number 21. Never letting sharp tools live loose in a pile. This was one of the old garage sins. Do not throw sharp tools into a pile. Chisels, plain irons, awls, bits, saw files, and even good screwdrivers could be ruined by banging against each other. Edges chip. Tips twist. Teeth dull. Old handymen often made simple holders for sharp tools. A scrap of wood with holes for chisels. A leather sleeve for an edge. A bit index. A saw hung by itself. A file wrapped or kept away from hard edges. Nothing fancy, just separation. The habit worked because sharpness is delicate. A cutting edge may be made of steel, but the edge itself is thin. It can be damaged by one careless drop or a week of rattling in a drawer. This is where older tool culture differed from disposable culture. A sharp tool was not just another object. It was stored according to what it was built to do. If it cut, it was protected. If it measured, it was kept straight. If it tightened, its working end was not abused. Number 20. Using the right tool instead of the nearest tool. Many tools are ruined by impatience. A screwdriver becomes a pry bar. A wrench becomes a hammer. Pliers become a nut rounder. A chisel opens a paint can. Then people wonder why nothing in the garage works right. Old fathers could be fierce about this. Not because they worship tools, but because they knew what misuse cost. The right tool is shaped for a reason. A screwdriver tip is meant to turn screws. A chisel edge is meant to cut. A wrench jaw is meant to fit. Use it for the wrong job, and the tool may survive once or twice, but it loses itself over time. Of course, old garage men improvised when they had to. They were not helpless rule followers. But they knew the difference between clever improvisation and lazy damage. If the pry bar was hanging on the wall, there was no honor in ruining a screwdriver. The old habit was simple: pause long enough to get the right tool. That pause saved a lot of steel. Number 19. Cleaning saw teeth before storing the saw. A hand saw can look fine from 5 feet away and still be miserable to use. Old-timers knew to check the teeth. After cutting pine, painted wood, damp lumber, or anything with resin, a saw could collect pitch and dust. If it went back on the wall that way, the buildup hardened. The next cut dragged and felt dull even if the teeth still had life. An old carpenter or home handyman might brush the teeth, wipe the plate, and remove sticky buildup before hanging the saw again. He might not do a full sharpening every time. He simply did not store the saw dirty. This habit kept a good tool feeling good. It also taught a larger lesson: dullness is not always only dullness. Sometimes the tool is dirty. Sometimes the surface is gummed. Sometimes the problem is neglect pretending to be wear. Modern garages have fewer handsaws now, but the principle applies to many tools. Clean the working part before blaming the tool. Stop the count for a moment. Look at what these first 7 habits share. They all happen after or between jobs, when nobody is watching. Wipe the tool. Protect the metal. Hang it where air can reach it. Give it a home. Keep sharp edges out of piles. Use the right tool. Clean the saw before storage. That is the hidden life of old tools. The public part of a tool is the repair it makes. The private part is how it is treated afterward. Old garage men understood that the private part decides whether the tool is still ready 10 years later. The next habits move deeper into the old garage: handles, files, bits, measuring tools, coffee cans, and the quiet routines that made a small workshop feel dependable. Number 18. Keeping wooden handles dry and smooth. Old tools often had wooden handles, and those handles needed care. A hammer handle, file handle, chisel handle, brace knob, hand plane tote, or old screwdriver handle could last for decades if it was not left soaked, cracked, or rough. Old-timers wiped wooden handles when they were damp. They did not leave them outside overnight. They smoothed splinters before the handle became painful. They watched for looseness where wood met metal. This mattered because the handle is where the worker meets the tool. A rough handle changes how the hand grips. A loose handle makes the strike uncertain. A cracked handle can turn a simple job into a dangerous one. A tool with a bad handle may be blamed as worn out when it only needed attention earlier. In many old garages, a father would rather replace a handle than throw away a good hammerhead. That attitude came from a time when parts had value and tools were expected to be maintained. The wooden handle carried the memory of work. Keeping it sound was part of keeping the tool alive. Number 17. Never storing files where they rub together. Files are easy to ruin quietly. They may look tough, but their cutting teeth are small and precise. Throw several files together in one drawer, let them rattle against wrenches, or leave them under heavier tools, and they lose bite faster. Old garage men separated files. Some hung them. Some slid them into sleeves. Some kept them in a narrow rack. Some wrapped the better ones in cloth. The goal was not luxury. It was keeping the cutting faces from grinding against other steel. They also knew not to use a file without a proper handle. A bare tang can be uncomfortable and unsafe. A simple wooden handle gave control and kept the tool from being mistreated. This habit shows how old-timers thought about invisible wear. A file does not usually break dramatically. It just stops cutting well. Then a man pushes harder, slips more, and gets worse results. Protect the teeth, and the file keeps its bite. Neglect the teeth, and the tool becomes dead weight. Number 16. Brushing dust out of drill bits and auger bits. Old drills and bits were often cleaned before they were put away. Twist bits, brace bits, auger bits, countersinks, and small specialty bits could hold wood chips, dust, resin, or metal shavings in their grooves. If that debris stayed there, it attracted moisture, hardened, dulled edges, and made the next hole rougher. An old handyman might tap the bit gently, brush out the flutes, wipe it, and return it to its place. If it was a brace bit, he might check the lead screw and cutting spurs. If it was a small twist bit, he made sure it went back to the right size slot. This habit mattered because bits are easy to lose and easy to abuse. A dull bit makes people push harder. Pushing harder breaks bits, burns wood, and ruins clean work. Many so-called bad holes began with a bit that had been stored dirty or dull for years. Cleaning a bit takes seconds. Replacing skill takes longer. Number 15. Keeping measuring tools away from rough work. Old-timers protected measuring tools differently from striking tools. A ruler, square, level, tape, caliper, marking gauge, or chalk line did not belong under hammers, oily chains, paint cans, and loose nails. If a measuring tool is bent, dented, sticky, or unreadable, it quietly ruins everything after it. A bad measurement can waste lumber. A bent square can make a cabinet look wrong. A level with a damaged vial can lie to the worker. Older garage men knew this, which is why measuring tools often had special spots. The square hung flat. The level had its hooks. The tape went back in the apron or drawer. The chalk lines stayed closed and dry. This was not neatness. It was protecting truth. Cutting tools shape the work, but measuring tools tell the worker what reality is. If those tools are mistreated, the whole job starts with bad information. Number 14. Marking tools with the family name. In old neighborhoods, tools traveled. A neighbor borrowed a pipe wrench. A brother-in-law needed a saw. A son took pliers to fix a bicycle. A church repair day mixed 10 men's tools on one table. That is why many old tools carried initials, paint marks, stamped names, or a strip of colored tape on the handle. It was not vanity. It was survival. A marked tool had a better chance of coming home. It also told everyone that the tool belonged to someone who cared enough to identify it. Some men used an engraving pencil. Some burned initials into wood handles. Some brushed a stripe of leftover paint on the handle. The method mattered less than the habit. This is part of why old inherited tools feel personal now. A hammer with a grandfather's initials is not just a hammer. It is evidence that the tool lived inside a family system. Modern tools often disappear because nobody knows whose they are. Old tools came home because they had a name. Number 13. Keeping small parts in sorted containers. The old coffee can full of screws is famous, but the best garages went further. They sorted nails by size, screws by type, washers in one jar, hinges in a box, picture hangers in an envelope, odd bolts in a drawer, good brass screws kept away from bent rusty ones. This habit saved tools because small parts decide how tools are used. If the right screw is available, the screwdriver is less likely to come out and twist. If the right washer is nearby, the wrench does not have to force a bad fit. If the right nail is chosen, the hammer does not beat the work to death. Old handymen knew that a job often fails in the small hardware, not the big tool. A garage with sorted parts also reduced panic buying. The family did not buy a new package every time a screw was missing. They checked the jars first. The coffee can was not clutter when someone understood it. It was a little savings bank made of steel, brass, and memory. Number 12. Saving original boxes and instructions for special tools. Old garages often kept boxes longer than modern people would expect. Not every box. Not useless packaging. But the box for a sharpening stone, a specialty plane, a good drill, a soldering iron, a tap and die set, a socket set, or a measuring tool might stay on the shelf for years. Why? Because the box protected the tool and kept the small pieces together. Instructions mattered too. A tool with missing parts or forgotten adjustments becomes less useful. Old-timers often tucked the little paper back into the box because they knew memory could fail. This habit was practical humility. The owner admitted that future him might need help. Modern packaging is often designed to be thrown away. Older boxes were sometimes sturdier, but the deeper habit was not about cardboard. It was about keeping a complete tool complete. A specialty tool without its guide, wrench, bit, or small attachment can become an expensive orphan. Old garage men tried not to create orphans. Number 11. Cleaning up the bench before the next job. The old workbench was not always spotless. But it had to be ready. At the end of a job, a good garage man cleared the surface enough for the next piece of work. Nails went back to their jar. Shavings were brushed away. The pencil returned to the tray. Sharp tools went back to safe spots. Oily rags were handled carefully and not left in careless piles. This habit protected tools because a cluttered bench damages everything. A chisel gets hidden under a board. A square gets knocked to the floor. A small screw disappears into sawdust. A good plane sits blade down on grit. Someone reaches for a tool and grabs the sharp end. The bench is where tools meet work. If the bench is chaos, every tool is in danger. Old fathers often made children clean the bench before leaving the garage. At the time, it felt like a chore. Years later, many people remember it as the moment they learned that work has a proper ending. The job is not finished when the thing is fixed. It is finished when the shop can begin again. Stop again and notice what the middle of this list is really about. Old garage habits were not only about preserving metal. They preserved readiness. The handle was dry. The file still cut. The bit was clean. The square was straight. The tool had a name. The screws were sorted. The special parts stayed together. The bench was ready. That meant a small repair could begin without a shopping trip, a search party, or a ruined tool. The old garage gave the family confidence because it had been cared for between emergencies. Number 10. Sharpening before a tool became useless. Old-timers did not always wait until a tool was dead dull. They touched up edges while the tool still had life. A plain iron that was only starting to drag. A chisel that no longer left a clean shaving. A knife that crushed instead of cut. A lawn tool that was chewing more than slicing. A bit that had begun to burn the wood. The old habit was to notice early. That made sharpening easier. Restoring a completely neglected edge takes work. Maintaining a decent edge takes much less. This habit also made the work safer and cleaner. Dull tools require force. Force leads to slips, broken parts, ugly cuts, and frustration. Sharp tools still require respect, but they do the work they were shaped to do. Old garage men understood that sharpness was not a luxury. It was the tool's honesty. Number 9. Not lending the good tool without a conversation. Tools in old neighborhoods were borrowed often. But the best tools were not handed out casually. A father might lend the rough hammer but not the good saw. He might lend the pipe wrench after saying, "Bring it back clean." He might refuse to lend a specialty tool to someone known for returning things broken. This was not selfishness. It was stewardship. The tool had to serve the family for years. Lending it to the wrong hands could shorten its life in an afternoon. Old-timers knew that not everyone treated tools with the same respect. When they did lend, they often taught, "Use this bit slowly. Do not pry with that. Keep the parts in the box. Wipe it before you bring it back." The habit protected more than objects. It protected standards. Number 8. Keeping a coffee can for rescued hardware. Every old garage seemed to have one. A coffee can, tobacco tin, peanut butter jar, cigar box, or old drawer filled with rescued hardware. Screws from a broken hinge. Washers from a dead appliance. Brackets from a shelf that came down. A good latch from a storm door. Odd nails, small hooks, spacers, knobs, clips, and bolts that looked useless until the exact day they were needed. This habit made tools last because it reduced bad improvisation. If a man had the right screw, he did not have to force the wrong one. If he had a washer, he did not have to over-tighten a bolt to make up for a missing part. The saved hardware also carried memory. An old handyman could reach into a can and know where a piece came from. That little latch was from the back screen door. Those brass screws were worth saving. That washer fit the mower handle. The coffee can look messy to outsiders. To the family, it was insurance. Number 7. Keeping moisture off the floor and away from tools. Old garages were vulnerable to water. Rain came in under doors. Snow melted off boots. A damp garden hose leaked near the wall. A roof drip found the wrong shelf. A bucket left on concrete collected condensation. Old-timers watched for this because tools hate careless moisture. They lifted toolboxes off bare concrete. They kept good tools away from leaky corners. They hung saws and squares above splash height. This habit was simple prevention. Rust often begins because a tool was stored in the one place everyone knew was damp. Older garage men learned their buildings. They knew which corner stayed cold, which shelf collected dust, which part of the floor got wet after rain. They did not pretend all storage spots were equal. The tool lasted because the owner knew the room it lived in. Number 6. Retiring tools from fine work before throwing them away. Old-timers did not always throw a worn tool out. They changed its job. A screwdriver with a tired tip might no longer be trusted on good screws, but it could live in the rough drawer. A paintbrush too worn for trim could become a primer brush. A file past its best might be kept for rough work. This habit stretched value without pretending a worn tool was still perfect. That honesty matters. Using a tired tool for precision work ruins the job. Throwing it away too early wastes what usefulness remains. Old garage men often had tiers: the good set, the everyday set, and the rough set. Children learned which was which. Do not take the good screwdriver for scraping. Do not use the trim brush on fence stain. Do not grab the sharp chisel for dirty work. This was not hoarding. It was classification. The tool's life changed, but it did not end before its time. Number 5. Checking cords, handles, and moving parts before use. Old garage safety often began with inspection. Before using a tool, the careful man looked at it. Was the handle loose? Was the hammerhead secure? Did the pliers open smoothly? Was the cord on an electric drill damaged? Did the clamp still hold? This habit protected both the worker and the tool. A loose handle gets worse if ignored. A stiff joint gets damaged if forced. A damaged cord is not a tool care issue to gamble with. It is a reason to stop and have it repaired or replaced properly. Old-timers were practical, not reckless. They knew tools gave warnings. A wobble, a squeak, a split, a spark, a smell, a strange heat, or a looseness meant the tool was asking for attention. Modern speed sometimes encourages people to push through warnings. The old habit was to pause before the work turned expensive or dangerous. Before the final four, pause for one more thought. A lifetime tool was rarely kept alive by one grand repair. It was kept alive by small respect repeated until it became automatic. Clean it. Dry it. Store it. Sharpen it. Label it. Sort the parts. Protect the edge. Check the handle. Know the damp corner. Know who borrowed it. Know when it is no longer a fine tool. That is what old garage culture understood. The tool was part of the household. Not a disposable accessory to a weekend project, but a quiet servant that deserved care because the family depended on it. Number 4. Teaching children how to put tools away. Old fathers often taught tool care before they taught complicated repair. A child might not be allowed to use the saw yet, but he could learn where it hung. He might not sharpen the chisel, but he could learn not to drop it in a drawer. He might not rebuild a latch, but he could learn to wipe the screwdriver and return the screws to the jar. This was how garage knowledge passed down. Not in a formal lesson. In small corrections. Hang a teeth in. Do not set the plane blade down. Put the hammer back. Wipe that before it rusts. Close the drawer. At the time, those instructions could feel endless. Years later, they become the voice people hear when they pick up a tool. This habit made tools last because it protected them from the next generation's ignorance. It also gave children a sense that the garage was not a junk room. It was a place with rules because useful things lived there. Number 3. Buying fewer tools and knowing them better. Old garages often had fewer tools than modern garages. But the owner knew them. He knew which screwdriver fit the old hinge screws. He knew the hammer that balanced best. He knew which saw cut straight, which bit wandered, and which level he trusted. That familiarity made tools last because careless ownership declined. When a man knows a tool, he notices change. If the handle loosens, he feels it. If the edge dulls, he sees it. If rust begins, he catches it. If a tool is missing, he knows by the empty spot. Modern abundance can make tools anonymous. There are 3 drills, 6 tape measures, 2 boxes of bits, and nobody knows which ones are good. When tools become anonymous, they become easier to neglect. The old habit was not poverty. It was intimacy with the equipment. A smaller set, cared for well, can outlast a crowded garage that nobody understands. Number 2. Ending every job with a reset. Old-timers believed a job had an ending ritual. Not a fancy one. A reset. The tools were gathered. The bench was cleared. The sharp edges were protected. The bits went back to size. The rag wiped the metal. The floor was swept enough to find dropped screws. The leftover hardware was sorted. This habit made the next job easier before anyone knew what the next job would be. That is the quiet genius of it. A garage reset is an act of faith in future work. It says another problem will come, and when it does, this place will be ready. Without that reset, every job leaves a little wreckage behind. After 5 projects, the garage becomes a search. After 10, it becomes a storage problem. After 20, tools begin disappearing inside the mess. Old garage men did not always have spotless shops. But the best of them knew how to bring the garage back to readiness. Number 1. Treating tools like inheritance before they became inheritance. The greatest forgotten garage habit was not wiping, hanging, sharpening, sorting, or labeling. It was the attitude underneath all of them. Old-timers treated tools like they were going to outlive the owner. Because often they did. A hammer bought in 1954 might end up in a son's garage in 1980. A craftsman wrench might pass to a grandson. A plane might sit on a basement shelf for 40 years and still be capable of clean work because someone before had kept it dry, sharp, and whole. That is a different way to own something. If a tool is only yours until it breaks, you treat it one way. If a tool may belong to your child one day, you treat it another. The old garage carried that feeling even when nobody said it out loud. Initials burned into a handle. A saw hung in the same place for decades. A coffee can of screws that moved from one house to another. A father's warning not to misuse the good chisel. A grandfather's habit of wiping a wrench before closing the drawer. These were not just quirks. They were a culture of stewardship. Think back to that garage in Dayton in 1961. The screen door is fixed. Supper is waiting. The father could leave the tools on the bench and call the job done. But he does not. He wipes the screwdriver. He brushes the bench. He hangs the awl. He cleans the saw teeth. He puts the small screws back where they belong. The repair took an hour. The habits took 2 minutes. But the habits are what the tools remember. That is the old value worth keeping. Not because every modern tool is bad. Not because every garage needs to look like a museum. But because useful things last longer when people act like usefulness matters. Attention keeps rust away. Order keeps loss away. Sharpness keeps force away. Respect keeps waste away. And a tool cared for after the job is a tool ready to serve the family again. If this reminded you of a father, grandfather, neighbor, old workbench, pegboard wall, coffee can full of screws, or a tool you still own from someone who came before you, tell us what garage habit you remember. Because sometimes the strongest thing in an old toolbox was not the steel. It was the discipline of the person who put it back clean.